So anyway, let's get started. Alright, so now you've seen the introduction, so I'm just going to do a couple of things, and then I'll make a new video to kind of then develop more ideas. So if we start with a curve, you can see that once you drag something, and I should do it kind of here first. You may have watched me start typing in. You can double click on the screen and type in what you want to use, and it will kind of come up with anything that's titled that, much like the menu structure in Rhino. And then you grab that component. Now that of course is very useful when you know Grasshopper pretty well. But when you're first starting, you might kind of have to go hunt and find things. So if you want to start to target like a geometry in Rhino, so if I start to draw something there, and I want to target it so that I can use it now in Grasshopper and start manipulating it, you want to pull down that component. If you don't really know what geometry you're going to use, just pull down this, and it can be really any geometry. It can be a surface, a solid, a mesh, a curve, a point, and that would work for all of it. But typically I try to kind of maintain kind of knowledge of what geometry I'm really going to use and just use that geometry. So I'm just going to right click on the component. You can see that it's kind of this yellowish orange, and that means it's really kind of empty, or it's not kind of, it is empty, and so it doesn't really have anything to do. So I'm going to right click on it. I'm going to set it to one curve. You might notice that you can also set to multiple curves. So if I had set an idea that I did have several curves here, I could use that. If you set to one curve, it's just going to set it to whatever you select. Now I've already selected this in Rhino, so it's going to kind of automatically kind of grab it. If I didn't have that, then I would just hit set one curve. You can see that Grasshopper went away. It's still there, it's still functioning, it's just waiting for me to do something. I'm going to select that curve, and as soon as I do, it comes back. And you'll see that then suddenly that yellow-orange component turned into a gray one. And that means that now it has something to do, or it's not empty anymore. And when I click on it, it turns green, and you might notice that on the screen where that line was, there's this preview happening that's red. And so all that means is that's kind of a placeholder for that geometry. If I hide the geometry now, there's this red thing. I can't select it in Rhino, but it is still there. And when I select it here and it turns green here, it'll turn green there. So that's just as you go through your various script, you're going to know kind of what it is that you're manipulating by selecting it here and then seeing what pops up on screen. So as long as there's a geometry to mess with, it'll be there. And so what you're going to, so now we're just going to start building. Let's just divide this curve into a series of points. I'm going to grab the curve. Because I'm dividing the curve, I'm going to assume that since it's a curve, if I want to manipulate in some way, it's more than likely going to be here that I'll go. And let's see, right here you can see that has a division tab on that ribbon, and I'm going to use the divide curve. And okay, so this will help us understand a little bit more about how Grasshopper works. Inputs are always here on the left. Everything kind of builds from left to right. So as you start to fill in your components, you're going to start at the left side of the canvas and start working your way to the right. And then its outputs are on the right here. So left inputs, right outputs. In between those two things, there's something going on. It's an operator of some sort. So let's just roll over the C. What it's asking for will come up in this yellow panel, and you'll see that it says it wants a curve to divide. So I'm going to take this curve, I'm going to go to its output, going to grab that. It creates this kind of snake dashed arrow, and I'm going to plug it into the C. And you can see automatically something's happened on the screen. And the reason that it already has happened without me plugging something into here, you'll see a lot of inputs have default settings, or default values. And in this case, the number of segments that is going to divide my curve has already been preset to 10. Now if I want to change that, I would go up here, grab a slider, and I'll just double click on it, and I'll change this to integers, and I'm going to add, say, like 20 as my max value. And I'll plug that in, and since it's set to 0, it really didn't do a darn thing. But as I increase the number of segments that's going to divide, you can see that the number of points, so now I'm at 2 segments, 1, 2, so then now there's 3 points, and then as I increase to 3, now there's 4 points, so on and so forth. So the results of this are that I grabbed one of these panels so I could see the results. The result is that it's created a series of points. These are division points, and they match the number of segments plus 1. So you can see that it starts at 0, so that's the first point, and then it increases to the last one. So instead of being 6 points, there's actually 6 segments. So that means there's 7 points, 0 to 6. It's really important to acknowledge that 0 in any kind of list is going to be the start, and then it's going to go to whatever the amount is. But 0 starts the list, not 1. So you can see that you also get other there's other information that you can analyze or use. One is the tangent. So essentially that's going to mark kind of the tangent at that point of this curve. So it's going to kind of move with and adjust itself with the curve. And then there's a t-value, and that t-value is basically along this curve, which appears to be about 62 units long. It's measuring the length to the point. So if this is the start point, it measured, and the first point is 10 units, 10.5 units along that curve, and the next one's around 20-ish, so on and so forth. So that just measures length. And though those things can be important, but normally you're using just really getting those points. And so I will just quickly, I'm just going to copy these two things. And copying is just copy and Control C and Control V, those two things. And I'm going to create another line. And let's just move that up in space, so you can see there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to target that one now. Alright, and since my idea is to kind of connect the dots, so I'm going to draw a line between the start and of this curve and the start of that one. Okay? And so I want them to be using the same slider to do the operation. The more that you can keep things kind of relative, the better. It is kind of the first beginner scripter would probably copy and paste also the slider. But that would be kind of stupid, because if I'm trying to connect the dots, I want them to have the same amount of points, right? So if I do 2 sliders and then I adjust something, I have to then go in and adjust both of them. So you're always thinking, you know, what things can I keep kind of relative to one another when building a script. And the more that you can keep those elements combined, so that you're working less, and it'll help you in the kind of troubleshooting of things, the better. So if these two things are going to use the same number of points, then I'm going to use the same number to feed them. Alright, so now let's just connect the dots. Now, if I want to connect point 1 to point 1 here, let's see what I can find up here under curve, because even a line is considered a curve in Rhino world. So I'm going to look under its primitives, and I can see right here these components have icons, and the icons usually do a pretty good job of describing what they're going to do. In this one, if I roll over, it says create a line between 2 points. That sounds like exactly what I want to do. So I'm just going to grab that, and you can see right now the list of information coming out of this point is a series of, and I'll just stretch this this panel out. It has a list of points, because you can see it has an X, Y, and Z, X, Y, and Z, again and again for 0 to 12, so 13 points. That seems to work out. And then I'll plug this in here. Same thing, only now we can see that the Z has a value. It's no longer 0. Well, that makes sense because this is actually up in the air, as opposed to this one being on the XY plane. So that all makes sense. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab these points. I'm going to plug one into the A value, and you can see if we roll over that these two things want a line start point, so these are the start points, and a B an end point, so I'm going to plug that in. Sometimes if you get things kind of overlapping one another, it looks like there was already plugged in, but it's actually this thing that was plugged in, so you got to be careful of that. And then we can see, how that build works. Now there is a chance that as you were drawing these, you happen to draw these one from left to right and the other one right to left, and you might, if you're following along, you might kind of end up with something like that. And all that meant is that you built these geometries kind of in reverse order of one another. And so the start point for one is over here, and the start point for the other one's on the opposite side. Well, you can handle that problem in two ways. I mean, actually it's kind of making an interesting form, but if I really didn't want to do that, I can either go to the geometry that's being targeted and just kind of flip it by typing in flip, and that does it. Or I can go into curve, go to utility, and grab the flip curve, and essentially that's going to do the exact same thing. So it's really up to you. Typically I try to just limit my my components in Grasshopper, and if I already know the problem, I'm just going to address it in Rhino. But here's the beauty. I'm going to unhide both of the curves. You remember I hid this one. Now I can start to move that and make design decisions, and it will automatically adjust. So this is all kind of real time. And through these previews, I can see kind of how those geometries are going to relate. So I'm just going to turn off, I'm going to de-preview, or turn the preview off, I should say, of these two things. Because you can also see that because every component's creating a preview, it can get cluttered pretty fast. Now, so far it's pretty clean because I only have like 6 components going on. But it'll get pretty cluttered pretty quickly. So what I'm doing is I'm selecting. You can select them all. You can select just a few, and it's the same thing as far as how the window goes over it. This side, whatever it crosses over, it selects. If you go this way, it's whatever is actually inside the window that gets selected. And then I'm going to hit spacebar, and you'll see this little compass comes up. And that compass has some all kinds of things to do. You can group things. You can enable or disable components. But these are the two that I'm worried about right now. One's enable a preview, and the other one with this kind of blindfold is a disable preview. So I'm just going to turn that off, and you can see that all my points just went away, but my lines are still there. you'll see that it also turned these dark gray,